I am here to introduce Dr. Valencia. He received his master's degree in marriage and family therapy and a doctorate in psychology of religion and pastoral counseling. He is the head of the social science department at Penn Foster, as well as he serves full-time as a chaplain at Heartland Hospice. He currently attends Dallas Fellowship Church. I say Dallas Fellowship, it's the E3 Fellowship Church in the Bath Mountain area, near Scranton Wilkes-Barre, and he counsels there as well. He is highly intelligent, has his reputation precedes him, so I think you're really going to enjoy this session today.
Hi everybody. Hello. Janice, thank you for the gracious introduction. After that introduction, I couldn't wait to hear the speaking myself. Today we have a topic that is quite complex, and that is opioids. It's basically a topic about drugs, or more specifically about drugs that are prescription drugs. So I have a little bit of an outline here. I'm pretty bad at following outlines because my mind goes many places. That's usually because of the overload, as they say. But we'll be consistent in following this outline to the best of our ability. So, let me get my paperwork out here. As you can see, it's a lot of it. But I won't go through that. I do have a couple of handouts for you, mostly dealing with definitions in drugs. And we will go through that. We will begin with a case study as well as the scripture, because I believe the scripture is foundational to dealing with drugs as well as any kind of addiction. Well, let's begin with a word of prayer for the Spirit of God to help us understand. Gracious God, we thank you in the name of Jesus Christ. For the power of your Spirit to descend upon us, Lord, to give us wisdom, to give us understanding. Above all, Lord, to give you glory as we look at the creatures that you have created, who have fallen into sin, who have fallen into addiction. Help us, Almighty Father, to be humble before you, even before them, for you are at work in their lives before we meet them, even as we work with them, and even as we say goodbye to them. Be with us today. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. So as you heard, I am a chaplain with Heartland Hospice, and I see a lot of people at the end of life, and people who die, and families who grieve the death. But I've also worked with addicts in many different settings, and they come in all shapes and forms. And I want to say that everybody in this room is an addict. That's not what it is. You have an addiction. Think about it for a moment. You may have never thought about it. I'm not an addict, but everybody is. It's just what, as one inmate said to me, tell me what you're smoking, and I'll tell you how you do it. Okay? So, the topic of today is opioids. What is an opioid? Anybody has an idea what an opioid is? Can you tell me what an opioid is?
Drug.
Painkiller.
That's right. An opioid is basically a chemical. It's a chemical compound that when binding to a receptor, whether in the brain, we'll be talking about the brain, whether in the brain or in the systemic circulation, that is in the rest of the body, it activates the response. And it's basically doing that for the sake of diminishing the sensation of pain. So you can think of an opioid as a little pill or a little liquid that you take, ingest into your body, goes through the digestive system, does its work, is metabolized by the liver, and produces its effect, which is hopefully reducing pain. Okay, with that idea in mind, let's get into our presentation. So you can have your outline there for you. I'm going to walk you through this outline because, as I said, I have a lot of information. Here's the case for you. I'm going to read it quickly. Charles is a 33-year-old white man. He goes to the emergency department as an ER, and he is showing the symptoms. He has enlarged pupils. He has a severe nausea, he's vomiting, diarrhea. He has muscle aches, and he has a lot of anxiety. Sound like a picture you haven't seen before? He is really agitated. All right, he reports to the attending physician, typically a resident. He says, I feel like I'm going to die. Plain and simple, doctor. I've been shooting heroin and morphine. It's a cocktail for death. Every 3 times a week. And on occasion, whenever I feel like it, I also take some NJ. Anybody knows what an NJ is? Only one. Okay. And cocaine, whenever. In other words, whenever I feel like it, I take a cocktail of that plus my cocktail of my regular. So today, doctor, I feel like I'm dying. All right, after a little bit of medical expertise, temperature is 103 degrees. You know temperature baseline, that's too high. Blood pressure is 170 over 95. He has a heart rate of 1.8 beats per minute. And he is irritable, really angry. He also experiences some abdominal cramping, hyperalgesia, and photophobia. Light bothers me. That's photophobia. This is a picture of a typical opioid addict. Others don't make it to the ER. They die. But this is a picture of this particular person. Let me give you a little background. He started with his diet pills in his teen years for weight control, plus drinking as a response to physical abuse from his alcoholic father. In other words, the drinking was to cope with the trauma of the abuse. He was prescribed Tylenol number 3. There's different kinds of Tylenols in medicine. That's the one I know. For pain after minor surgery. He started street pain pills and doctor shopping. Today we call it also pharmacy shopping. For back pain and depression. So you can see the picture. Even having healthy teeth extracted so that he could get pain medication from a dentist. He was distraught upon the death of a close relative, after which he switched to intravenous opioid injections. After discharge, I included fentanyl. You probably heard of fentanyl. In 2016, it became a major bust because fentanyl was killing people like by the hundreds on a daily basis. We'll get into that. I included fentanyl patches that he ate or injected. This is an individual who is desperate to get high. Had 3 inpatient treatments. Hello. Revolving door effect, I've seen now a lot in the criminal justice system. You go into the into the penal system, then you come out, and then you go back in. He's tried 3 inpatient system treatments. Always relapsing after discharge to increasing higher doses. He tried methadone. Anybody knows what methadone is? It's a you take in a treatment facility, methadone clinic. He tried methadone maintenance treatment for 6 months with some benefit, though unable to completely stop using street drugs, and never felt normal on methadone. Get the picture. All right. Did he die? Most usually answers. Did he die? Tell us what happened to him. He has been abstinent from illicit opioids for the last 5 years. On sublingual buprenorphine and Naxon. I'll speak about that in a minute. He also visits his psychiatrist monthly for psychotherapy. Because a psychiatrist expenses drug because they are licensed to prescribe medication. And adheres to a treatment contract of monthly attendance at group meeting at Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. He provides clean, drug-free urine tests, because in the urine you can get the metabolites, which are the residues of the drug that is processed by the liver. So that's where you have a urine test. He was promoted at work, negotiated a loan to purchase a house, because you came from the street. That's where you end up with opioids, to having a house. And he sees relatively content. He's a happy man. That's one success story, but it's not usually the case. Individuals die of opioid overdoses. I have plenty of evidence here. I call it evidence because that's what the government calls it, for opioids. It quadrupled the use of opioids. Mostly prescription medication. In other words, people who take medication legitimately given to them by their doctor are getting high on their drugs. As a hospice chaplain, I see the end of life. But when I have worked as a counselor and do home interventions, I see lots of pills. And I think about kids. You know, kids are curious. They try everything. Teenagers trying the drugs because it gives them the feeling of euphoria. That's what drugs do. But there is an increase, super increase. That's why the government calls it an opioid crisis. We know it as an epidemic. There's a difference between an endemic situation, a pandemic situation, and an epidemic. Pandemic is all of us are sick all over the world, right? Endemic is proper to a location. An epidemic is a sickness that's just killing everybody. And here we are with an epidemic of opioid overdoses. The Surgeon General of Pennsylvania issued a standing order so that a particular reversal antagonism, I'll explain that in a minute, would be used so that people who are dying because of overdose can take that. Like if you saw me overdosing, you can take that medication and give it to me and I'll come back to life. Because that's right. Because we're trying to save people's lives. Congress has also issued different legislation and bills have been passed so that we can curtail, in a sense, the opioid crisis. It's a difficult world out there. Let me give you a picture into that. So let's go into our handout that you have in your folder there. Because again, we have little time and I'd like to cover as much as I can. So why is there an opioid epidemic? Yeah, I'd like to give you a few suggestions. One is economics. We have an opioid epidemic because there is an economic factor to that. How is that? The first law of economics is demand and supply. You have people who demand, who require the drugs, and you have suppliers. There are legal suppliers, pharmacies, and there are illegal suppliers, the black market. Today we call it the dark web. The second reason is there is an overprescription of opioids. Opioids are being overprescribed. All the medical literature up to date talks about that factor of overprescription. So the government, as well as the Human Services, the Department of Health and Human Services, the federal agency that deals with health issues, is issuing guidelines so that prescription by pharmacies and by physicians is more regulated. Because it just went out of control. There was a lady who escaped to the Bahamas who was a physician who had issued thousands of prescriptions for conditions that were not even there. And so what happened with one of her customers is that she issued all these prescriptions, and what the customer did is sell the prescriptions. And now you have a money situation going on behind the scenes, of course, because if it was known, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, which is a federal agency of the law enforcement, would crack down on those people. But a lot of people do this. They buy it, and then they sell it. There's also an increase in the lifespan. People are living longer, which means that we have more elderly people who require opioids. People are living longer. And we're not living to the 500 and 600 and 900 years old. I cannot even fathom that. But we're living longer. Medical care has allowed us, through chemicals, to live longer. There are environmental triggers. That's another reason why we have an opioid epidemic. There are environmental triggers. There's a TV advertisement. What is the most likely drug that you will see on TV that is acceptable today? Alcohol. And it's publicly done. Right? Before Prohibition era, in American history, you remember that. Look, you can't do that. Stop it. What did people do? They did it underground. The alcohol. Let's get drunk. Go all the way to the Greeks. Bacchus, the god of drinking. You look at the pictures of the architecture or painting or whatever, and you see Bacchus with a lot of grapes and juice and drinking. There's an environmental trigger for that. The media glamorizes drinking. I can count on many commercials during an hour of watching TV, which I don't watch too much enough time, but if I watch TV for an hour, I see a lot of alcohol being advertised. And not just alcohol in the sense of beer, higher alcohol. It burns when it goes down. Okay. Adaptability. People have become adaptable and accepting of drugs, of opioids. Well, you know, Susan, my grandmother, she just needs her drugs. What they don't know is that she is losing her mind and is beginning to overdose. Meaning she's taking 3 or 4 pills when she's supposed to take only 1. So nobody's monitoring her, and she's fastly dying because of the drugs. The values have changed. Society has different values than Christian values, than biblical values. Whatever makes you happy, go for it. Right? It's about you. Just you. Enjoy it. Hey, that morphine gets you high? Hey, go for it. That heroin gives you, go for it. That ecstasy, you college girl, go for it. Next morning, who am I? What am I here? What happened last night? Or worse, take the ecstasy plus the alcohol, the party, yeah, body grab, and then what happened? It's a corpse in the streets. Overdose. But here is something that you can remember. Why do we have an opioid epidemic? 3 little words. Availability, anonymity, and affordability. You can buy it anywhere you want. It's available. If not legally, you can get it in the dark web. Now the danger with that, of course, is that it's not being one role of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is to vet all the studies that prove the drug is not harmful. Okay? The dark web, there is no FDA. It's just you, the money, and the person who's going to sell you the drug. Do you know that people go to Mexico or buy stuff from Canada because they cannot get into the United States? And sometimes the regulations in those countries are not the same as in the US. Therefore, what happens? You ingest something that you bought online and then you end up dead. It happens a lot. You may not hear it in the news because the news, car accident, people die every day. Sometimes of this issue. So, availability, affordability is cheap, and anonymity. Nobody has to know. Available, anonymous, affordable. The trifecta of opioids. But what is an opioid epidemic? It means it is everywhere. And guess what? It's in the church. We like to think sometimes it's out there, those people, those junkies, 1960s language, acid heads. No! Think about Jesus in Luke 13, saying to the disciples, do you think that the towers fell on those because they were more sinful than you? No. Jesus is saying you are the same level as they are. And the day you forget that, you will forget how to counsel with compassion. The day you forget that, you'll forget how to counsel with compassion. Because we have to be able to integrate Scripture into our thinking so that our worldview is biblical. And it doesn't come with knowledge of Bible verses. It comes with the knowledge of God as He works through us. Paul says in Philippians 10 that I may know Him and the power of His resurrection, the fellowship of His life. I may know Him. You would think, Paul, you know the Lord. You saw Him. And He still longs for that knowledge. The knowledge is transformational. Not just the knowledge of the head. Because we can have the verses coded in our hippocampus, which is the structure that encodes the memories. But what about the heart that when you see the addict, they see Jesus? It's like a Samaritan woman beating him at the well. And Jesus, what did Jesus do? You sinful woman! No. He listened to her. And not a single judgment from His mouth. Instead He said, woman, you can worship me anywhere. And you too are welcome. But who are the ones who criticized Jesus? The disciples. Why are you talking to her? When we are thinking like God thinks, we can minister the way Jesus does. A heart of compassion that is not proud, that understands Galatians 6. Be watchful that you too may not fall. Because guess what? God used for it. We can all fall. A mentor of mine used to say, we are wounded leaders. We have been wounded by sin, others who sinned against us. Maybe my father was an abuser, so he sinned against me, but then I sinned against other people. So we are wounded, because when Jesus rebukes and heals us, now we are wounded leaders. We extend compassion to others. That's what Jesus did when He healed a leper. You know that in His society, if you were a leper, you were to shout, leper, 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 and stay away. And people were supposed to run away from you. But it also meant that you couldn't be part of that community. That Levitical law prohibited you to be part of it. You have to be out there in the skirts. But when Jesus healed somebody, we forget this. When He healed somebody, He didn't just heal their body. He restored them to community. Go and show yourself to the priest. Offer the sacrifice according to the law. And then you're back. Because the priest will give to the community, the synagogue, the gathering of everybody. This man is clean. Which meant accept him back. What is the picture I'm drawing? The church is that community today. We are welcome sinners to the redeeming of the cross. We are on an equal footing, Paul says in Romans 3. We have all fallen. Equalizer. You think is God an equalizer? Oh yeah. We have all fallen. But by grace we are saved. So an epidemic is what exists out there for economics reasons, overprescription, increase of the lifespan, environmental triggers, adaptability. Now in adaptability, you grow up watching your dad drink. and you believe that's the normal way of living. And my dad didn't got drunk. My brother, he used to shoot heroin, so that's what I did. As a young teenager talking to me, that's what I did. Because my brother did. It's normal. That's what I mean by that. Adaptability. The values have changed. And there is a crisis, a health crisis. When you think of opioids, you need to think of health crisis. That's what the government calls it. That's what all the programs out there in terms of medicine are about, is a health crisis. If there is a health crisis, then you need allocation of federal budget money for that. And you need retraining of physicians who have forgotten what opioids do. Because they got too happy just giving prescriptions away. And then you have something like Big Pharma. Have you heard of that? Those are the pharmaceutical companies. It's a for-profit. We care about people. No, they don't. It's a for-profit. Hundreds of billions of dollars to pay for annual studies. Do you think that you just want to invest $100 million and not get anything back? Of course not. And the profit is huge. So there is an economic factor there. So let's identify opioids. I have hopefully enough of this, so you can pass this around. See how we're doing on time? So opioids, as you see in that list, there are different kinds of opioids. The word opioid comes from opium, which is a plant. For thousands of years, 4,000 years ago, the people in Mesopotamia, you hear about it in the Bible, Mesopotamia, literally means the land between two rivers. Okay, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And people used to take this plant and just, it was natural, it's a plant. Now I had a gang member who was behind bars for a criminal offense, and he said to me, I've read the Bible. Doesn't it say there that God created all the plants of the earth? He had read the Bible, because they have prison ministries, right? He had read the Bible and picked out a verse and said, hey, the Bible says that God created all kinds of trees and herbs. And that was his rationale for getting high. And in Revelation, it says that anybody who adds to the book of Revelation is part of the taking of the tree of life. I think that applies to the whole Bible. But here, identify and define opioids to stay with the topic. So an opioid is a natural derivative of opium. So you have morphine. Morphine is the standard drug that everybody talks about. And you have and others. So you have morphine as being the reference drug. Okay, it's a painkiller. You have codeine is a little weak, meaning it's not as effective as morphine. And hydrocodone is variations of Vicodin, by different names. You're familiar with that. So I'm assuming you are familiar with those drugs. But here's a list of those drugs. Now what you need to know, because I'm going to go through these very fast, so get your brains ready, because it's about the brain. Okay, very fast. Ready? Go. So here's your spine. And the spine is going to bend like this. And now you're going to have the brain. In your spine, you have a small structure known as the pons. It's French for bridge. Okay, it's a bridge between the spine itself and the brain itself. And you have a small structure known as the medulla oblongata. Okay, don't worry about the name, just follow the reasoning here. This section here is called the mesencephalic region, meaning the middle of the brain. Most of medicine is ancient, so Greek and Latin, so that's fine. But what I want you to get is exactly the chemistry of how opioids work. If anything else you don't get, please get it. So the spine ascending, there's a small area here called the ventral tegmental area. That area, the ventral tegmental area, has projections like little cables that go all the way to another structure known as the nucleus accumbens, known as the reward center. Okay? So, from here to here, there is a small neurotransmitter. It's a chemical in the brain known as dopamine. You heard of that? Norepinephrine, dopamine, etc. Dopamine is the one that goes all the way to the nucleus accumbens. All right? So, if I take a drug like, say, morphine, okay, my spine has little cables known as spinal nerves. So let me give you a clear example. Let's say this is a hot surface. And I am very curious, because I'm curious, so I touch the hot surface. What happened? In microseconds, my neurons in my hand send a chemical impulse all the way through my arm, got to my spine. In the spine, there did a little conversion known as interneurons, and went up the spine, all the way, passing this region, passing the ventral tegmental area, all the way to a little structure known as the thalamus. You heard of that?
Yeah.
The thalamus is like a relay station. It says, you can come in, you cannot come in, you are important, you're not important. Let's say the thalamus says, this is important. If it is important, the thalamus is going to send it to a little area right up here, known as the sensory area. Okay? It tells my brain, something happened, in my brain now, in this area over here, known as the prefrontal cortex, right here. Okay. Medial prefrontal cortex. It says, from over here, start over here. It says, get your head off that. So I go like this, and this happens so fast. Wow. What is happening is it went up, ascended, came back, and my hand is off. You have been wonderfully, perfectly made. What happens when you take a drug, any opiate, alcohol, caffeine, yes, caffeine is a drug. What happens? This area, this natural process that God built is hijacked. Let me give you an example you can empathize with. And that is a virus. What is a virus? A virus is a pathogen, something outside our bodies comes into our system, like HIV. Human immune virus. It's a virus. You can get sick by viruses, bacteria, fungi, but there is one of them, a virus. What does the virus do? It enters the cell. The cell has a mechanism by which it divides itself. The life of the cell is to divide. If the cell doesn't divide, it dies. So, it hijacks that mechanism by masquerading as one of the cells. And once it is inside, it really reveals its colors. And by the time it reveals its colors, the virus has hijacked the mechanism. It has begun to what? Duplicate. And once it duplicates, it gets into the system and metastasizes. That's a cancer. That's what cancer is. Any virus, like cancer, anything like that, it just hijacks, multiplies, spreads. And when it does that, it kills everything. Any drug, this is the part I want you to really get. This area right here gets hijacked by any opioid that you take.
What do you mean hijack? Like, where does it go?
It means that the natural process that your body uses to do endorphins, for example, I get really high, get really happy after a run, that's a natural process. If I want to enhance that, I take a drug like heroin, and I get really happy, but I don't need to exercise. It uses the same process that I naturally use to get me high. But nobody wants the after effects of the drug. Take me off the heroin. Take me off the alcohol. And then what happens? Notice when I drink alcohol, and I like to use applications rather than lecture because people remember that. I know that because your brain remembers. This is alcohol. Never drunk before. I've been drinking for 15 years. This is alcohol. You see the difference? I've never drunk before. Wow, it's disgusting. Watch me. My body loves this. That's called chemical dependency. I take this away. Watch me now. You see the difference? I have the DT, delirium tremens. I have Parkinsonian type symptoms. This is Parkinson. This is normal Parkinson. This is not Parkinson. This is alcohol withdrawal. This is caffeine withdrawal. I know you can sympathize with that. You see, it hijacks the natural processes, and now it, like a virus, takes control. And because it does it over a period of time on what is called receptors. There is a kappa receptor, there is a mu receptor, there is a delta receptor, there is a sigma receptor. They all have Greek names. The one you need to remember for opioids is mu receptor. Now, it's a Greek letter. I'm going to put that mark.
Oh, it fell down.
Oh, it did? No, it didn't. Behind me. Oh! You were paying attention. I'll show you a trick that my brain was doing when I was looking for it. Now, if I take a drug and I forget to take a dose after I took it and I forgot, I took it, no I did. What time was that? Oh, I forgot. And I take it again just to be safe. I'm 75 years old. My body is no longer as it was. My liver is no longer as it was. As an alcoholic, my liver works overtime. The liver is right up here. What does it do? It metabolizes. What does that mean? It means that it breaks down the chemical compounds of anything that we take. I know you didn't sign up for a biology class, but you gotta know this. That's how you understand opioids. That is a compound. Protein. Everybody knows what proteins, right? Yeah, what are they made of? Amino acid. You get a name for the class. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. What does the liver do with the drug? It breaks the chemical bonds because it needs ATP. What's ATP? Energy. That's what we get from the candy bar. We need that glucose, that sugar. Guess what? Your brain needs sugar. It's called glucose. It consumes 20% of the energy the body uses. And he's a tiny guy. He's very tiny, 3 pounds. And he lives up here. If anything happens to this skull here, it creates intracranial pressure. And when it does that, you have headaches. And if you have headaches repeatedly, migraines, localized migraines, meaning where they happen, you eventually begin to act a little weak. Why? Because your brain is... Opioids do the same to the system. For example, when people die of opioid overdose, what happens to them? They have respiratory problems. Unfortunately, medicine hasn't been able to separate the pain receptors, which are kappa. I said you have their own Greek names. So kappa, you have mu, that's the one that when you remember. The mu receptor for opioids, remember that. The delta and the sigma. Okay? The mu is the one you need to remember. Every opioid medication binds to that receptor. And when they bind, it's like this. This is the, I don't want to get too deep into this, but this is an enzyme. This is another enzyme. And they come together and they work together to break the chemical so that your body can take it. Okay? There are these little connectors known as synapses. You heard that word before? Synapses, one, it triggers chemicals. It goes into a little gap between the two. I used to tell my students, it's like people crossing a river. They're one land, on one side of the river, the other people on the other side. You want to cross on the other side, what do? You need a canoe or something to go over there unless you know how to swim. But I put it difficult for them. I said, there are alligators in the water. And the students would say, well, that's not fair. Well, life is not fair. And for a person with this condition, it's not fair. But these receptors get activated once the drug binds to them and produces euphoria. Oh, I feel good today. Take the drug away. I feel lousy today. Let me get my drink. Let me get my coffee. Get out of my way. I'm going to worship Jesus. Let me get my coffee first. I actually had a person say that. Have you had your coffee yet? I need to worship Jesus. Yes, the Lord. But get out of my way. I need to go to the coffee place. Once I get my coffee, and the Lord is amazing. This little, I know I'm running all over the place, but that's okay. That's the way my brain works. This little handout that I gave you. If we have time, we will go into the chemistry of that, but I know you're not here for that. So let me just tell you that every drug that you see there is used for the purpose of helping people with pain. That's what opioids do. It's helping people with pain. If you have a car accident and you fracture a leg or something, you'll get to the emergency room. What they going to give you? An opioid. That's going to give you opioid. You have a heart attack, myocardial infarction. Your brain needs the oxygen. You have a heart attack, what happens? Your brain is starving. You have a stroke. Connection between the heart and the brain is like this. If there is no oxygenated blood to the brain cells die. Keep that in mind. Practical things that you can do. But each one of these is a drug. They have different names. I don't want to go through this because there's a different name. But the ones that you will always hear are morphine. Fentanyl is in the news a lot. Fentanyl is very potent. It's more potent than other drugs. But if you hear something like carfentanil, they give that to horses. There are people who take it. Because fentanyl is no longer doing it. The morphine is no longer doing it. I gotta get something higher. And a friend of mine told me just recently, there's this the name is funny, it's 3-methyl fentanyl. It's 1,000 times more potent than fentanyl and morphine. Now the names of what the heck is that? It's just chemical names. If we have time, I will break it for you, but you don't need to know that. Just keep this list in mind. Again, there's a lot of information there, but time will not allow us to go through that. Opioid use, abuse, and dependence. There are 4 steps that I like to mention as opioid use. The first step is legal use. People have opioids because they have been given a prescription by their physician. So it's legal use. That's a legal prescription. You had a condition, you were given a prescription. You have a surgery, you were given a prescription. Before you have the surgery to numb the body and the nerves, and after you have the surgery to numb the body and the nerves so that you don't feel pain after you wake up. Hopefully you wake up. Every surgeon's nightmare is that. Hopefully this patient wakes up. Especially if they do surgery. I hope he wakes up and I hope he can speak. Because if not, that's not good. Legal use, so prescription. Abuse. Did you know that you can go to the pharmacy and buy an over-the-counter medication and do a cocktail and get as high as little Johnny over here doing and shooting everything that you can think of? I won't give you the recipe though. But abuse. That is when people take a little prescription and then self-medicate. The typical self-medicating person or patient is the alcoholic. They medicate themselves with alcohol. If they have depression, what do? They drink. Because it is acceptable. Everybody, alcohol, yeah, social drink, I'm not an alcoholic, drink a little bit. Physical dependence. You move from opioid use You will be up to opioid abuse. So physical dependence is what we call addiction proper. Now your body is hooked on it. You need to have it. If you don't have it, you're going to have withdrawal symptoms. And nobody wants to be around you when you have them. Nobody. Because you're not yourself. If you've never seen an addict without their drugs, get out of their way. I had a monk call me once and said, he's not himself, he's throwing everything around everywhere. I said, just get out of the house. Because they're not reasonable anymore. And then experimentation. Teenagers tell me there's a lot of experiment. I want to know what getting high is like. Because my friends do it. Or Jenny over there, she was very popular, now she's very popular. Why is she popular? Because she's doing this or that. The DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder, that's the Bible for psychiatrists, by the way. Not for Christians, but for psychiatrists. Call it substance use disorder. Everything since the 1970s and 80s, the DSM has been diagnosed as a disorder. I will tell you this, caveat. Not a lot of the things in the diagnosis are scientifically proved. There are some gaps in the literature as to the biogenetics of it. The genetics plays a role. There's a lot of information that's missing. There are what is called in the literature lacunas, like empty voids as to the science of it. But remember, economics plays a role. There is, if you were to do an in-depth study of this, big pharma is connected with doctors, connected with pharmaceuticals at a local level, and it's all a bunch of people making money. Because, let me give you news, your body doesn't need drugs. It doesn't. But as we age, and as we suffer, drugs, we humans have become very crafty and creative in coming up with synthetics. We make them in the lab, and then we sell them to ourselves, and when we get hooked on them, we want more. And so we create more. That's creativity. But our bodies don't need drugs. They don't. The effects on human behavior. Am I on time? Am I running? Oh, got a little bit. About thoughts. Well, cognitive distortions is one of the effects of opioids. What that means is delusions. Persecutory delusion. Somebody's up to me. Well-intentioned comments become paranoid comments. You mean that to hurt me. You must be talking about me to somebody. You must be talking to the pastor about me. I told you my sin and now you're telling everybody. So suspiciousness. About emotions. Mood changes. People's moods change. Real quick. They could be very serene and calm and then boom, they're a different person. High levels of fear, anxiety, and anger. High levels of fear, anxiety, and anger. That is more than the average person would. As to actions, they become verbally confrontational. You cannot tell them anything. I'm going to tell you the truth in love. Don't tell me no truth. Agitated. Really agitated. As to behaviors, they get into fights. A lot of people end up in the criminal justice system because of the drug use, and then they get into fights. They have daring behaviors, the so-called daredevils. They try things that they never tried before. Little Jenny over there, she was so quiet and shy and godly. Look at her. She's a completely different person. And the craving, you always hear craving in the literature. People crave the drug. The heroin addict wants this more of the heroin to get the high that he first got. They want more to get back to that moment because, that was the moment, I want more. Body changes as a result of that. Psychodynamics of opioids, interactions and effects. Okay, you have heard about the connection between the brain and the heart. Key connection, cardiovascular problems with drugs. If I take morphine and a cocktail with cocaine, my heart will stop. Why? Because I no longer am able to breathe. Example like this. This is my heart. Now I take the drug. That's it. Digestive, I have crampings, constipation, which means my stomach is not doing its job. And I'm beginning to feel a little bit nauseous and vomiting. Why vomiting? Because every opioid triggers a little center in your neck that allows you to vomit. And metabolic, the poor liver is working overtime. Liver cirrhosis, alcoholics have that, but you can also have it if you're not an alcoholic. The liver produces a little bit of biles, which are stored in the gallbladder, which is right below it. And then what the biles do, picture them as acid. They are emulsifiers. They break things, the fat especially, so it doesn't accumulate in your stomach and causes atherosclerosis, the hardening of your arteries with a lot of cholesterol. Neurologically, your mind changes, is reshaped in many ways. You have hypoxia. What is that? This is a person normally breathing. A person with hypoxia due to drugs, they're going to die. The physical sensations, if you look at a picture, your chest feels empty. But an emptiness that you feel like you're going to drown in it. There's nothing in here, no air. So you feel like you're going to drown in it. So the major effect is lack of oxygen and anxiety, as I mentioned before. As to the spirit, you get depression, despair, guilt and shame. Some people do have guilt about their opioids. They may not be willing to confess it. And these three little sisters, I used to tell my students, they always go together. Fear, anxiety, and anger. Always you can count, you're going to find that in the person with opioids. Quickly to finish, what are the effects on individuals? Unemployment, poverty, homelessness. A lot of people in opioids are on the streets. Used to be lawyers, physicians, professors out on the streets. Violence, you can guarantee that's going to be there. Violence leads to the criminal justice system, so they end up in prison. Mental illness. You can always have an opioid addiction and a mental illness. This is called a dual diagnosis, or a comorbidity, a condition, physical condition with a drug. And eventually death. As to families, what does it do to families? Divorce. Distress. Others will call, please help me. He's destroying our finances. Distrust. Marriage without trust cannot survive. And debt. People get into debt because the drug is more important. As to communities, increasing crime. Wherever there are drugs, there is going to be crime. That's a sociological fact. In clandestine labs, like the meth labs that you can have in your house, in your basement, meth labs, the crack houses. All right, so how can I help? These are the three questions for the biblical paradigm. The biblical paradigm is rooted in the Bible. You need to be a good exegete of the Word of God. That's the condition to do counseling with individuals with opioids. But here's something I want you to remember. Ask the question that nobody's asking. Ask that question. What is leading you to this? Don't focus on the addiction. You're an alcoholic. They already know that. What is leading you to alcohol? What is leading you to morphine? Tell me about you. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your situation. In other words, be like Jesus and get to know the person. What are the spiritual issues that you should deal with? How can my church help? That's a question that you need to know. How can my church help? Christians, we have a lot of resources to help. How can the church help? Find out what those resources are. Invite the church to educate the congregants to find ways to help. And then, I want you to focus on this, and I'm just going to quickly read this. These are the things that you're going to deal with soul-wise with an addict. Trauma, Disappointment with God, if they have it. Suffering. Find out what the suffering is. Pain, not just the physical pain. Pain is physical, but it's also psychological. Find out the psychology of it. Anguish. Depression/anxiety. You're going to find it a lot in individuals. Abandonment. A young woman, 15 years old, is living like a prostitute because abandonment issue. Unworthiness. In Christ, we are all worthy. He made us worthy. But why is unworthiness? Remember, don't focus on the addiction, focus on the person. And finally, financial issues, family issues, and personal goals. I invite you to have personal goals. Give them, in other words, hope. The psalmist says, out of the depths I cry to you, Lord, hear my prayer. Psalm 130. Meditate on that psalm. So when you work with people with opioid addiction or any addiction, remember that psalm. Out of the depths I cry to you, Lord, hear my prayer. Thank you. Let's have a word. Almighty God, we thank you because in your presence, time is irrelevant. You are a God of mercy and a God of grace. Because of your grace and your mercy, we are here. We are able to say, Abba, Father. Almighty God, because of your grace and your love, we are thankful that your word, your inspired word, your eternal word, as the psalmist says, your word is written forever in the heavens. Lord, because of that word and because of your spirit, we can exegete the hearts of those who struggle with opioid addiction. Exegete our hearts, Lord, and give us wisdom, humility, compassion. Not a judgmental heart, but compassion, so that Christ may be seen in us in the glory.